Do you like scary movies?
Secret Window is a quiet, brooding, and it's definitely, I wouldn't call it a full-blown horror. It definitely is a horror story, but it's definitely more in the thriller, suspense, and I definitely have to call it a psychological horror. Johnny Depp plays Mort Rainey, and it's honestly one of my favorite performances of his. Like, he's got a big repertoire. He's played in a lot of big roles, and I kind of like just seeing him in one of these smaller, more, kind of personal, environments, and he does a lot of acting by himself as well, and I like him in this role. I like him in roles like this. Like, he's gifted enough. He can carry you through a lot of the gaps and the silences, and still communicate so much about what the character's thinking and his emotions, and that's one of the strengths of this movie too. It's the dialogue is purposeful. You don't feel like there's just a lot of wasted conversations. It's just, you don't feel like it's written just to kind of hold your hand, if you will. No, and it's very sharp, and I'd even say it's perfect for what it is. Like, and I wouldn't expect nothing less from Stephen King. And I think it's the dialogue that gives all what you get. It gives a lot of actually, it's the actions I see behind the dialogue that makes it feel like it's weighty. John Shooter, the character of John Shooter, played by John Turturro. I like that you have a scene where he's talking to you, he's warning Rainey, you stole my story, and then you don't see him, but you see where he's been. You see that he's done something. He's no spoilers, but more will often find like little messages from John throughout the movie, and so you feel his presence. Even when he's not on screen, you feel like just like Mort Rainey, you're kind of watching over your back, and that's done uniquely well in this movie. The character of John Shooter is an interesting one, a very interesting one, and it's not even that he's that complicated of a character. He's just there's a drive in the character, and John Turturro brings I don't believe anyone could play Shooter better. I think it is perfect casting.
2004's Secret Window. What do you need to know? It's awesome. I love how this movie starts off so simple and then it unwinds into such a brilliant psychological mystery. Once it gets going, it is a non-stop thrill ride with confrontation, tension, suspense, all beautifully filmed. Johnny Depp plays Morton Rainey, an author who is way down on his luck. He recently caught his wife having an affair. He is currently living in their lake house. He is going through a terrible case of writer's block. He's just sitting at his computer. He deletes what he writes. He's very back and forth on if he smokes or not. He has a very weird relationship with cigarettes. Very depressed. He's always napping. He's moping around in his wife's old robe all the time. He wakes up from his nap. He goes to open the door and he sees a stranger standing on the other side and greets him with the ever so friendly, "You stole my story." Mort is baffled at this man's accusation. He's barely awake, and the man just keeps pressing it. "You stole my story. I don't know how you got it, but you stole it." The conversation goes back and forth until Mort retreats inside. He watches the man leave. He then returns to his couch to take another nap. Later, he is out walking, and he runs into the man again. This time, they chat a little more civil, and Mort asks the man when he released his story because it's all about who wrote it first. And Mort says he beat him by 2 years, and he released it in a magazine. The man demands that he presents the magazine, and he gives him 3 days. Mort doesn't take the man very seriously at first, but before long, he realizes that he's dealing with a whole new level of crazy. And that's when it gets good.
The reason why I love this story is because it is about writing. It is ultimately about fiction writing and the sort of kind of turmoil and psychological, and the fact that Mort Rainey, his habits, naps, he's depressed, he's trying to quit smoking but fails. He is such a a relatable writer character, and he doesn't have that amazing of a life. He's going through a divorce. He's definitely in a down place in his life. So the characters are strong. They're not over the top though. You don't feel like anything about they feel believable. That's what the strength of Secret Window is. That's what the strength of Stephen King's characters are. Is that he focuses a lot on making the characters very three-dimensional and very believable people. I'd say that Mort Rainey it's a far more relatable story than his other story, The Dark Half, which dealt with basically the same exact, idea. Just sort of a writer going through some shit. You know what I mean? And there's definitely comparisons I can draw to the John Shooter character and the George Stark character in that book. But whereas that book, or at least there's a movie too of The Dark Half, but with that story, it's definitely more of just a balls to the wall horror story. It's psychological, and it's definitely more in your face. It's a crazy, awesome story. But Secret Window is a little bit more quieter. It's a little bit more brooding. It's a little bit more, creeping for sure. This feels like, at least up until a certain point where, the ending has us questioning everything, up to this point, this feels like a very real situation. This feels like a straight-up thriller, and it's a believable situation because Stephen King himself has experienced this where, someone will accuse him of stealing their story, or someone will show up to his house, in a very threatening manner like this, and it's definitely, I feel like he put a lot more of himself into these characters, because you see this character a lot. It's not just Mort Rainey. Mort Rainey's interesting, and he's got enough traits that you wouldn't say he's just another Stephen King author, writer, cliche that appears a lot in his stories. Mort Rainey feels very real, and that's also, I do have to give credit to the movie. I think that's also in part to Johnny Depp's phenomenal performance of him. Like, just the little subtleties. He's quirky, but believable. You know what I mean? Like, he really, I do believe this is an unsung, performance of his, where he's not playing the Jack Sparrows. He's not playing, some character in an MCU somewhere. He's playing a character that's a lot like how I imagine he himself is in his day-to-day life. Just this, just a guy. He writes. He hangs out at home. He gets bored. He gets depressed.
I have to agree with Jake that I also like this movie because it's about writing. Both him and I are writers, and we know all those struggles, such as napping, depression, and staring at a blank screen. Sometimes you just can't produce anything, and it makes you sad. It's funny that he brought up The Dark Half, because that is similar, and it also stars Timothy Hutton as the main star, and Timothy Hutton is one of the co-stars in this movie. He is the guy who is now with Mort's wife, the one that she had the affair with, and he plays a pretty big part with the tension, and you're led to believe if he's involved in the whole situation, and if it's much bigger than it seems. I can't really praise this film enough. I love so much about it. The way that they filmed it, the way that they have the flashback scenes, the way that the story goes, and it seems like it's very straightforward until it's not. I love the characters, and I love how they feel so authentic. It's very easy to see somebody going through a situation like this with their marriage falling apart, and then something as simple as someone knocking on your door and accusing you of plagiarism. I believe Stephen King had someone break into his house at one point, and they were like building a bomb in his attic. And so he kind of knows about the crazy fans and how far people will go if they think you're stealing their ideas. So I think this is a great story to kind of show that side of being an author. I also like that Mort does pretty much everything right as far as somebody in his situation. He first tries to talk to the man, that doesn't work. He goes to the police, they don't want to help him. And then he hires someone to watch over him, kind of like a bodyguard. He's a very smart character, and it feels very believable that he's really going through these things. He's really scared. He's in his home. He's unsettled. He thinks someone's in there with him. He is being terrorized by this man, And he knows that he's innocent because the timeline that Shooter gave, he wrote his story before his. He just has to get the magazine to prove it. But this man's not letting up on him whatsoever. I also like that there's only a handful of characters. That way you can really focus on what's going on. And it's also revealed that Mort has a history of perhaps plagiarism and also dealing with some crazy fans. It's really up in the air whether he's dealing with a real situation or if Shooter is in fact crazy or if there's something more to it.
You know, and David Cope's direction is also quite great. I do think David Cope was, you know, like, and he's had an odd career. He's definitely, you know, directed huge productions. He's directed good movies. He's directed bombs. He's directed some not too good movies. And this one seems to be one of the few, you know, just straight up suspense thrillers. And honestly, I wish he would have done more in this genre. In a lot of ways, people may call me out on this, but like, I feel like this is the movie that M. Night Shyamalan has been trying to make his whole career. Just a solid thriller with a good twist ending. And I'm not throwing shade at M. Night. I love M. Night. He's one of the most creative directors out there. But again, I can never say that his films are quite as, you know, uniform. There's a lot of flaws that hold those movies back. I don't believe there is any flaws in this movie. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm also saying that it feels like a fully realized product. And it's got a doozy of an ending. It's a doozy. In fact, I'd even say the ending to this film is one of my favorite endings to any horror film ever. It is literally, and the plot itself is surrounded by this exact same thing, a perfect ending. John Shooter is upset with Mort Rainey because, you know, he believes he stole his story and also ruined the ending, which was perfect. My ending was perfect. I know I could do it. Todd Downey said, helping himself to another ear corn from a steamy bowl. And it's weird because even in the context of Secret Window, you know, the Stephen King story, it's taking this line out of the context of John Shooter's story, which is, sowing season in the movie, at least. And somehow you can get an idea of just how important that line at the end is to, you know, the story, just because of how important it is to this story. It really is a must see, even if you're not into a lot of the build up and the slow kind of brooding atmosphere this film creates. The ending is worth seeing, and it is perfect.